In a city that never slows down, one young man stopped to help. Not knowing that behind a curtain, someone had seen him and was about to change his Lee. The sun hadn't even touched the rooftops yet, but the city was already pulsing. Steam hissed from subway grates, delivery trucks rolled over potholes with practiced indifference, and the traffic lights blinked like they'd given up trying to control anything. Among it all, weaving through the streets with a brown canvas jacket and a dented delivery bag strapped across his back, was Jamal. Every morning, same rhythm. Wake at 5. Heat up a boiled egg and coffee. Stretch the kinks out of a sore back on the tiny couch he called a bed. Kiss his sister's forehead as she snored softly beneath a thrift store quilt. Then lace up his shoes, worn at the edges, and hit the pavement. Jamal was 27. Tall, lean, with eyes that had learned to scan for shortcuts, traffic, and danger in the same glance. Life hadn't been kind, but it hadn't broken him either. He moved with quiet purpose, never too fast, never too slow. Just enough to keep up. Just enough to keep going. He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. But in a city where people passed by each other like ghosts, Jamal still said good morning to strangers. Still picked up litter when no one was watching. Still let his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Diaz, borrow his charger even though she never gave it back. The world didn't really notice Jamal. He was the guy who handed you your takeout with a polite smile, even when his feet ached and his next tip might be his only dinner. He was the guy who slipped an extra straw into the bag because maybe, just maybe, you were having a rough day too. His route took him past the same cracked sidewalks, the same flickering bodega sign, the same bakery with the cinnamon rolls he could never afford but always smelled anyway. The city felt too fast for some, too brutal for others. But for Jamal, it was a living, breathing thing. Loud, demanding, unforgiving, and yet somehow worth fighting for. There were moments, brief ones, when he paused on a street corner, watching a kid chase a paper airplane, or listening to a street saxophone play something sad and beautiful in the drizzle, and he would wonder, was this it? Was this all his life would be? People often talked about dreams like they were trophies waiting at the finish line. But for Jamal, dreams were stitched into the grind itself, into every delivery bag he zipped, every thank you he muttered under his breath, every time he resisted the urge to snap when someone called him boy. What kept him going wasn't hope in the abstract. It was a face, her face, Nia, his little sister, 12 years old, obsessed with comic books and science fairs, smart beyond her years, and fragile in ways only Jamal knew. She had lost too much already, and Jamal had sworn, on the day they buried their mother, that Nia would never feel that kind of abandonment again. He'd carry the world on his back if it meant she could fly, and maybe one day, just maybe, he could hang up the delivery bag and pick up a chef's knife instead. That was the real dream, the kitchen, a place where his hands could create instead of just carry. But dreams, like ovens, took time to heat up. And for now, there were orders to deliver, people to serve, and bills that didn't care about aspirations. Still, every now and then, when he passed the culinary school tucked between the record shop and the nail salon, when he paused and looked through the glass at rows of pristine stainless steel counters and students in white coats plating dishes with tweezers, he let himself believe. Just for a moment. Then his phone buzzed. New delivery. Same city. Same streets. But somewhere out there, he believed, something had to change. It always starts small. Sometimes it starts with just holding open a door. There was a picture Jamal kept folded in his wallet, creased from years of being opened and refolded. In it, a younger version of himself, maybe 10 years old, standing barefoot in a kitchen no bigger than a closet. His arms were wrapped around a woman, round-faced, radiant, flower on her cheeks and peace in her eyes. His mother, Denise. She used to hum while she cooked. Never lyrics, just little melodies that wandered and danced through the house. Even when the lights got cut or the fridge was empty. Somehow she made things taste like love, like hope, like home. She used to say, "Food tells the truth. You can't fake care in a good stew." Jamal learned to cook beside her. Not from recipes, but from rhythm. Pinch here, a dash there. Taste, adjust, try again. She taught him that seasoning wasn't just about flavor, it was memory. Every dish was a story, and if you paid attention, you could hear it speak. He had dreams even back then. Dreams of opening a tiny restaurant with his mom. Not fancy, just real. Somewhere people could eat slow, smile easy, and feel seen. But dreams, they shift when the world starts pulling people away from you. His mother passed when he was 19. Pancreatic cancer. Quick and cruel. The kind of loss that hollows you before you even realize you're grieving. That day, he became two people. The one who mourned, and the one who had to keep moving. There was no choice. Nia was only 6. A little girl with trembling hands and too many questions. No father in the picture. No grandparents left. No savings, no safety net. Just Jamal. And the weight of suddenly becoming someone else's everything. He dropped out of community college the same week his mother died. Sold her old rings to pay off the last month of rent. Swapped textbooks for time slots on a delivery app. Cooking became something that lived in the back of his mind, like a song you can't quite remember the lyrics to. The fire was still there, but he had other fires to put out. Bills, groceries, rent, homework help, parent-teacher meetings, sore feet, side hustles. Nia didn't know all of it, and he never let her see it. That was the deal. He'd be the shield. She'd be the light. Some nights, after putting her to bed, he would stand in the kitchen, alone in the soft hum of the refrigerator, and just hold a frying pan. He'd let his hands remember. The weight, the heat, the rhythm of stirring, the smell of onions caramelizing, just like Mom used to make. Then he'd put it back and return to the couch, answering support tickets for an online grocery app while his stomach growled. But he never gave up the dream completely. He squirreled away savings in a private stash, a crumpled envelope labeled, "Not yet." Inside, 100 here, a 50 there. Birthday tips, bonus shifts, anything extra. All for culinary school. One day. Not today. But one day. Still, even dreams need fuel. And lately, the envelope felt light. Some mornings, he'd stand outside the window of the culinary school, watching the students in their white coats. Some of them his age, some younger. Sharpening knives and plating dishes with tools he couldn't afford. It wasn't envy. It was ache, longing, a hunger he couldn't feed. Was it foolish to still believe? That question lingered in the back of his mind as he delivered meals to condos he'd never live in. As he held doors open for people who wouldn't look him in the eye. As he reminded himself every single day that he mattered, even when the world seemed to say otherwise. But there were also signs. Small ones. Quiet ones. The old man who gave him a weathered cookbook as a tip, saying, "This one's got soul." The teenage customer who asked him, "Do you cook?" Like maybe somehow it showed. And Nia, who once whispered in a sleepy voice, "When you open your restaurant, can I take the orders?" He smiled at that. Maybe he'd make it. Maybe not. But he'd keep walking. Keep delivering. Keep dreaming. Because kindness still mattered. Because character still counted. And because one day, just maybe, doing the right thing for the right reason would open the right door. He just didn't know it would come on a rainy Tuesday, when he stopped his bike near a cracked sidewalk and saw an elderly woman fumbling with 2 grocery bags and a broken umbrella. Sometimes, the moment that changes everything doesn't feel like a moment at all. Not at first. The rain wasn't heavy. Just enough to make the pavement slick and the air smell like old metal. A soft drizzle like the city exhaling. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make everything feel slightly heavier. Jamal was behind schedule. The morning had already gone sideways. A flat tire on his bike. An impatient customer who screamed through a call box because her dumplings were 5 minutes late. And a missed breakfast that was catching up to him now as a dull ache in his stomach. He tapped through his delivery app, squinting through fogged lenses, and pedaled faster down Monroe Avenue. He was about to turn down Jefferson Street when something caught the edge of his vision. An elderly woman, standing near the cracked edge of a curb, struggling with an umbrella that had turned itself inside out. One of her grocery bags had torn open, and a can of green beans rolled into the street, nearly getting crushed under a passing cab. She wasn't just struggling. She was invisible. No one helped. No one slowed. The sidewalk pulsed with the usual blur of city life. Umbrellas, coats, heads down, headphones in. Jamal gripped the brake. His brain screamed, "Keep going. You're late." But something inside him, a quiet voice that always sounded like his mother, said, "This is the moment, right here, the kind that shows you who you are." He stopped, jumped off the bike, slid the delivery bag off his back, bent down to collect the cans first, then the torn bag. He approached slowly so he wouldn't startle her. "Ma'am?" he called. She turned, startled but grateful. Her name was Mrs. Carter. Her voice was soft, cultured, a little frayed around the edges. Her hair, silver and pinned into a loose bun, dripped rainwater down the back of her coat. "My umbrella's done for," she murmured, fumbling with the metal ribs like she was trying to put back together something far older than fabric and wire. Jamal folded it for her with a flick. "Let me help with the bags." "Oh no, you've got places to be." "I don't want to." He gently interrupted. "Where you headed?" She motioned around the corner. "Building next to the florist." "Then we're walking," he said. She clutched his arm, and they started forward, slowly. Her boots tapped cautiously on the slick sidewalk. Jamal adjusted his pace. He let the weight of her bags pull on his shoulders. She talked. Not much, but enough. She told him she'd lived here since 1968, that she watched the city change from her window, saw shops come and go, people age and vanish, watched the skyline rise like a wall between what used to be and what now was. "But kindness," she said with a pause, "kindness doesn't go out of style, even if it's rare these days." At her stoop, Jamal set the bags down gently. She offered a $10 bill with a shaking hand. He waved it off. "Nah, you remind me of my grandmother." She blinked slowly, and for the first time since he'd seen her, something in her posture shifted. Lighter, sadder, like his words had unlocked a memory she hadn't dared visit in years. Her hand rose to his cheek, trembling. "Good boys still exist," she whispered. "I almost forgot." Jamal smiled, awkward but sincere. "You take care now, all right?" He turned to leave, tugging his bag over one shoulder. The rain had eased into a fine mist, and the street looked softer, somehow. But he felt it before he saw it. A sensation, the back of the neck kind, like being watched. A weight not threatening, not dangerous, just present. He glanced around, saw nothing. Just windows, just the city, just movement. But as he crossed the street, a single detail caught his eye, so small he almost missed it. On the third floor of the same building, a curtain moved. Not in the wind, not by accident. Moved as if someone had just been standing there, watching, and for a moment the back of his neck tingled. But then his phone buzzed again, new delivery. He exhaled, shook it off and pedaled forward, unaware that his act of kindness had not just been witnessed. It had been noted, and it had already begun to change the course of everything. The rain had stopped, but the window remained fogged. Behind it, the room was dim, drawn curtains, the soft flicker of a vintage lamp, and the quiet hiss of a stovetop kettle that had long gone cold. The scent of dried jasmine clung to the air, delicate and persistent. A figure stood motionless at the window, hand resting lightly on the curtain hem, eyes fixed on the sidewalk 3 floors below. Evelyn Carter, 83 years old, once a name on business pages, once a force in real estate circles, now mostly a myth within her own building. The woman who never used the elevator, the name on every lease, the presence behind every annual renovation. Tenants knew her only from checks signed and policies enforced. But here, in the quiet folds of her apartment, Evelyn was simply what time had left behind. A widow, a watcher, a woman of means with few remaining reasons to use them. She had seen the entire thing. From the moment Jamal stopped his bike to the second he disappeared around the corner again. Every detail absorbed with the precision of someone trained not just to look but to see. He didn't hesitate long. Just enough to prove he was torn. Just enough to prove he still cared about the world and his place in it. She'd seen hesitation like that before, always in good people forced to survive. The city had changed. Evelyn had watched it shift from stoops and community gardens to concrete towers and digital gates. But kindness, true kindness? That had always been rare, quiet, almost extinct. And yet there it was. A young man, probably barely scraping by, soaked and late, who still bent down to help an old woman with trembling hands and a torn grocery bag. No audience, no reward, just instinct. That, Evelyn thought, was character. She stepped back from the glass and reached for her notebook. An old leather ledger, cracked at the spine and thick with yellowed pages. Not the kind of book one keeps for receipts. This was different. This was a memory vault. A collection of encounters that mattered. A record of people who had moved her, few as they were. She flipped past entries like echoes of lives. The girl from years ago who returned a wallet filled with cash and walked away without a name. The nurse who stayed long after her shift to sing to her husband as he passed. The man who folded napkins into cranes at a diner. One for every child who looked lonely. On a blank page, she wrote, Jamal, Jefferson Street, rain, umbrella, carried bags, refused money, quiet grace. She underlined it, then circled it. 3 times. Her mind was already working. Quietly, purposefully. She didn't give handouts, not anymore. She gave opportunities. Seeds, not charity. She'd spent decades learning how to change things without being noticed. And she had the tools to do it still. Funds tucked into accounts no one tracked, programs that bore no trace of her name, partnerships with institutions that trusted her silence. But this wouldn't be quick. It had to be deliberate. It had to mean something. So she closed the notebook gently and walked across the room to her antique roll-top desk. Opened a drawer. Inside, stacks of personalized envelopes, monogrammed in faint gold. She selected one and scribbled 3 words in neat, looping cursive. We noticed you. Then she folded a slip of paper, tucked it inside, and sealed the envelope shut. The gears were turning now, slow, patient, powerful. Evelyn believed in testing people before lifting them. Kindness was one thing, but consistency, that was the rarest currency of all. The envelope would find him soon enough. But what it carried, that was only the beginning. Days passed. The memory of the rainy sidewalk faded into the folds of Jamal's routine. Life, relentless as ever, pulled him back into the grind. Delivery schedules, late-night budgeting, early morning wake-ups with coffee brewed from yesterday's grounds. But something was different. He couldn't explain it, couldn't name it, but it was there. A softness around the edges of things. A reason to look up more often. To notice the shape of clouds, the laughter of children skipping past the crosswalk, the scent of warm bread wafting from the bakery he still couldn't afford. And then, almost a week later, something unexpected arrived. A message from his building's management office. Please visit the leasing desk before 5 p.m. today. That was it. No explanation. No detail. At first, Jamal assumed the worst. A billing issue. A mistake. Maybe someone reported his bike locked to the fire hydrant again. But when he walked into the leasing office that afternoon, still in his work clothes, still wearing yesterday's tiredness in his eyes, the receptionist simply smiled and handed him an envelope. Thick, heavy, cream-colored, his name written in elegant cursive on the front. Inside, a letter, typed. No logo, no signature. Dear Jamal, we noticed you. Your kindness does not go unseen. Your integrity is rare. Your rent has been paid in full for the next 12 months. Come to the rooftop garden at 6 p.m. today. We'd like to meet you properly. He read it twice, then a third time. No name, no strings, no catch, just recognition, and a kind of generosity that felt almost absurd. 12 months, paid. A whole year of not scrambling at the end of the month. A whole year of breathing room. A year where he might actually save, maybe even apply to that culinary program he kept reading about at 1 a.m. while Nia slept. He folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope, holding it like something sacred. But the real question wasn't the gift. It was the sender. Who had seen him? And why now? At 5:57 p.m., he stood in front of the old rooftop door. Paint chipped. Hinges rusted. The kind of door you stopped noticing when your life lived below it. He hesitated, hand on the handle, then pushed it open. The city opened before him in gold and silver light. The sun was low now, casting long shadows across the skyline. Wind danced gently through the trellises. Raised garden beds brimmed with herbs. A string of warm fairy lights hummed above a narrow brick path that curved through potted lavender and rosemary. At the far end sat a wrought iron table. And a woman, Mrs. Carter, but not the woman he remembered from the street. Her coat, dark green wool with silver embroidery, sat perfectly on her shoulders. Her hair, pinned in a soft bun, glinted like polished pewter in the sunlight. A small teacup rested beside her notebook, and her expression was calm, direct, timeless. She looked as though she belonged to this space, as though the garden had bloomed around her, not the other way around. She didn't rise. She didn't need to. Instead, she motioned to the empty seat across from her. "Come," she said. "Sit." Jamal approached slowly, unsure if he was walking into a dream, a test, or both. As he sat, the smells of the rooftop met him: earth, mint, the faintest trace of citrus in the breeze. The world below felt far away, muted, as if they were above time itself. "You're the one who paid my rent?" he asked. Her lips curved into something close to a smile. "I'm the one who saw you." Jamal swallowed. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she poured a second cup of tea from a small porcelain pot and slid it toward him. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Someone I once was, and someone I still believe in." He blinked, tried to speak, couldn't. She leaned forward slightly. "You think no one sees, but the world sees more than you think. The question is, what will you do now that it's seen you?" Jamal glanced down at his hands. The calluses, the tiny scar from a dropped kitchen knife, the fingerprints that told the story of thousands of deliveries made in silence. He looked back at her. "I don't know," he said. "Good," she replied. "That means you're ready." Then she reached into her notebook and removed a second envelope. This one was smaller, handwritten, sealed in wax. She slid it across the table. It landed just inches from his fingers. "Open that when you get home, not before." Then she sat back. The sun framed her like a portrait, calm, certain, unbothered by what came next. Jamal stared at the envelope. He hadn't asked for any of this, but maybe, somehow, it had always been waiting. The sun was dropping fast now, folding itself behind a wall of office towers in the distance. The rooftop lights blinked on one by one, bathing the small garden in soft gold. Jamal's hands still rested on the sealed envelope, its weight far heavier than the paper inside. Across from him, Mrs. Carter sat with the stillness of someone who had spent a lifetime learning to be underestimated. She had spoken with clarity, without pity. No performance, no drama, just truth, the kind that settled quietly in your chest and rewrote your understanding of everything. Jamal had never met someone like her. Not in real life, maybe in books or in the stories his mom used to tell, about the older women in the church who ran food pantries and funeral ministries while still keeping rent receipts folded in their pockets. But Mrs. Carter, she was something else. She hadn't just seen him, she'd studied him, she'd remembered, and now she'd offered him something far rarer than money. She'd offered him a door. "I don't usually make these invitations," she said, interrupting the hush between them. "Most people wouldn't know what to do with them. Some take, some forget, some run." Jamal's voice came quiet. "And what do you think I'll do?" She looked at him. Not just his face, but the whole of him. The way his shoulders slouched under years of quiet pressure. The way his fingers never fully relaxed. The quiet flicker behind his eyes. "I think," she said, "you'll pause, you'll question, and then you'll walk through, because you've already learned something most people don't. That strength doesn't always come from pushing harder. Sometimes, it comes from accepting help without shame." He said nothing, just nodded slightly, felt the knot in his throat tighten. Then, without another word, Mrs. Carter stood. "I've already said too much," she added softly. What's next is up to you. She turned and walked toward the rooftop door, her coat catching the wind like a banner from another era. But just before she stepped inside, she looked back. One more thing, Jamal. He met her eyes. If you choose to open that envelope tonight, really open it. Don't do it from fear. Do it from fire. He didn't fully understand what she meant. Not yet. But something about it stirred something ancient in him. Then the door closed behind her, and he was alone. The rooftop was still. The city hummed in the distance. Below, people rushed for buses, checked phones, argued at intersections. Above, stars began to poke through the dusky veil like promises half remembered. Jamal looked down at the envelope, held it in both hands now. It didn't look like much, but it felt alive, like a question, like the weight of a new beginning. He sat there a while longer, letting the silence wash over him, letting the night settle. His mind flooded with images. His mother's apron dusted with flour, Nia dancing barefoot in the hallway, the cracked sidewalk where he picked up a stranger's groceries in the rain. One moment, one choice, and now this. He thought about that line she'd spoken. Not a gift, a door. And that's when he knew this wasn't about luck. It was about alignment, about preparation meeting grace, about someone noticing, really noticing, and quietly saying, I believe in you. And just like that, something in him began to soften, to open. He stood, slid the envelope into his bag, and walked back down the stairwell. The weight on his shoulders hadn't disappeared, but now it had shifted. Now it felt like something he could carry, or maybe, finally, something he could leave behind. Jamal didn't open the envelope right away. Instead, he carried it with him, for hours, then days, tucked safely into his jacket pocket like a secret that wasn't ready to be told. He felt its weight as he stood in line at the corner market, as he folded laundry at midnight, as he fixed Nia's backpack zipper before school. He thought about it every time he passed the window of the Culinary Institute on Oak and Ninth, the one with its immaculate white kitchens, copper pans, and students that looked so far removed from his world they might as well have been on TV. But by Saturday morning, something shifted. It wasn't courage exactly. It was quiet certainty, the kind that grows not from knowing how, but from finally believing you're allowed to try. Nia was still asleep, curled up on the couch with one sock half off, her braids tangled from the night. The sun had just begun to rise, casting golden streaks across the floorboards like painted light. Jamal sat at the tiny kitchen table with a chipped mug of coffee, took a breath, and opened the envelope. Jamal, some doors open with keys, others open with courage. You've already proven the latter. I'd like to offer you both. Enclosed is full admission to the Northgate Culinary Institute's winter program, tuition, supplies, and living expenses covered for 1 full year. No strings, no spotlight, just the path you've already earned. Classes begin January 8th. You'll need time to prepare. Let me know by next Friday. Also included is a weekly invitation. I host private cooking sessions in my residence. Nothing formal, just food, stories, and a chance to remember why cooking matters. I hope you'll join me, because food is memory, and you, Jamal, are meant to create both. E. Carter. He read it again, and again. His hands, steady but warm with something he didn't want to name just yet, slowly set the letter down. Northgate. The very word felt holy, distant, unreachable, and yet, it was his now. He thought of the envelope on the fridge marked, not yet, stuffed with tip money and spare change. The years he'd watched life happen through glass. The nights he made pasta from dollar store noodles and stale garlic powder and still made Nia smile. He thought of his mother, her humming, her laughter, her belief that food could heal. And something cracked open in him. Not grief, not even joy, something simpler. Permission. That afternoon, Jamal climbed the stairs to the rooftop again, unsure what he would say but knowing he needed to be there. Mrs. Carter was already waiting. A small table had been set under the canopy of string lights. 2 cast iron skillets sat on a burner. Butter hissed gently in one. A bundle of thyme rested on a cutting board like an offering. You came, she said without looking up. I read it, Jamal replied. And? He smiled. You're serious? She glanced at him, amused. I've never joked with food. She handed him an apron. They cooked together. Quietly, she showed him how to crisp the skin without burning it, how to balance citrus with cream, how to plate without overthinking. No pressure, no performance, just rhythm, memory, trust. He told her about his mom, about his promise to Nia, about the nights he cooked for himself just to remember who he was. She listened, offered no advice, only silence and presence, the rarest kind. When the food was ready, they sat and ate under the sky. Steam rose between them, and something else too, peace. After a while, she asked, What will you do now? I'll go, he said, to Northgate, if the spot's still mine. She nodded once. It's yours because you earned it. I only held the door. Then she reached across the table and touched his wrist lightly. And when you walk through, don't forget this feeling. He looked around, the lights, the garden, the city pulsing in the distance. I won't, he said. She smiled. Good, because this is how you feed people. Not long after, she handed him a final envelope, thinner than the first. Inside, a simple invitation. Monthly supper, rooftop garden. Community dinner. Hosted by the Carter Initiative. Prepared by Jamal Morris. Guest chef and storyteller. Jamal stared at the line. Storyteller. And for the first time in his life, he felt like that was true. He wasn't just a delivery driver. Not anymore. He was someone who cooked with memory. Someone who had been given a table and now would invite others to it. He smiled to himself. Because some meals aren't about food. They're about turning kindness into legacy. It was a cool evening in early spring when the rooftop lights flickered on again. The garden was alive now. Full of herbs, flowers, laughter. Tables lined with mismatched plates and chipped teacups stretched under the canopy of lights like a humble feast waiting for a story. Jamal stood behind the long prep table near the back. His chef's coat was clean but a little wrinkled. His apron bore the stains of rosemary oil and roasted garlic. His hands were moving fast, but his heart was still. He looked around. Neighbors he barely knew now smiled like old friends. Mrs. Diaz, who used to bang on the wall when his music was too loud, was sipping lemonade and humming along to the jazz floating from the rooftop speaker. The mailman, the building janitor, a young mom with her 2 kids, even the leasing manager, who once threatened eviction over late rent, now asked where to leave the cupcakes. And Nia, 12 years old, still wearing her school uniform, stood proudly beside the sign-in table, scribbling name tags in colorful marker. He watched her hand one to a man in a worn coat. This one says, "Welcome. Everyone gets one," she told him. The man smiled and nodded. I like that. As the meal began, Jamal stepped up to the front. Not to teach, not to perform, but to offer something simple. A story. He cleared his throat. I'm not used to giving speeches, he said, voice quiet but steady. But I do know something about food. A few people laughed softly, encouraging him. Food saved my life, he continued. Not because it fed me, but because it reminded me who I was when everything else tried to make me forget. He paused. Let the silence breathe. A while ago, I stopped to help someone. It was nothing big, just groceries and a broken umbrella. But it changed everything. And I learned something that day. He looked around the table. Kindness doesn't ask for anything in return, but it gives everything. The rooftop was still. No applause, just presence. Exactly how it should be. Later, as the night deepened and people slowly filtered out, Jamal sat near the edge of the garden. The city stretched out before him like a sea of light. Mrs. Carter joined him. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. They sat in comfortable silence, watching people say goodbyes, trading leftovers in foil containers and hugs they hadn't known they needed. And Jamal said quietly, I get it now. Mrs. Carter looked over. Get what? He nodded toward the garden, the guests, the lights. This, why you kept that notebook. Why you chose me. Why you believe in people. She smiled, soft and proud. And he turned back to the skyline. Because the world doesn't change from the top. It changes in the quiet, in small choices, in the way one moment can ripple through a life. She nodded. Exactly. A week later, Jamal passed by a corner where an elderly man struggled with a grocery cart. He stopped without thinking, not out of obligation, but because now he understood. One small act could echo. One small moment could lift the floor beneath someone's entire life, just like someone once did for him. Sometimes you don't need to change the world. Sometimes it's enough to change one person, and let the kindness ripple the rest of the way.